This is me playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and that's Cloud riding backwards on a chocobo who is T-posing. Wow. $70 game, by the way. I'm just messing around. This game's great. I finally finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and yes, it took me a long time. That's because there's a lot of game to go through, and that's a good thing. Mostly. If you haven't finished it yet, don't worry. I'll keep any kind of spoiler talk to a later part of the video, and I will give you a warning beforehand, so you shouldn't need to worry about it. As for everyone else who wants to hear me talk about that spoilery stuff, same thing. That'll show up later on in the video. As a reminder, please subscribe for any and all future RPG videos and set the bell to get notifications for all. So, Rebirth. It's good. It's really good. The gameplay is largely the same as it was in Remake, with using basic attacks to fill your ATB bar, to pull off stronger skills and magic. It still works really well, and I quite like it. The new addition of synergy skills is great too. As your party members use ATB abilities, they'll fill in a resource that allows them to do flashy team-up attacks that also provides a temporary buff. These can be really clutch as it gives infinite magic points or increased limit gauge, and it's awesome to see these characters working together. It's mechanically strong, and it rewards you for swapping to control other party members to reliably fill their synergy gauges, and it's flavorfully excellent, since you get to see the characters connect and act more like party members instead of just several individuals in the same fight. Battles are still just as enjoyable, and there are some truly spectacular boss fights, along with some super frustrating ones with difficulty spikes out of nowhere, like a certain 1v1 boss battle that switches to a 2v1 halfway through. Also, I feel like they make the summon gauge appear more frequently than before. It's nice. They feel a little more reliable and can be a great come-from-behind mechanic. Plus, summons are just fun. The combat is still just as good with some tweaked mechanics, and I still really like how each character has their own unique functions and gameplay styles. Even if I didn't favor them, I liked how character-specific they were. Newcomers like Yuffie was a standout, Red 13 rewards defensive styles, and Cait Sith has a little bit of that controlling two characters at once feel. It was neat, and I liked how the game had a few moments of forcing you to play as split party members so that you can explore their mechanics. But of course all of that is great. They had a good foundation to work off of from 7 Remake. I would say the most impressive thing in Rebirth is the open world environments. This game is massive. There are multiple open regions that you can traverse and explore, and every time you think you get to the last one, you travel to another all-new one and have so much more to discover. It's ludicrous how big this game is. Each region is filled with random encounters, treasures to find, and landmarks to see, of varying quality. Regardless of how any of that feels, they managed to take the concept of an overworld from the original game and make it work in their new imagining. They did it! They succeeded in translating it into modern day and not have it feel like a barren, boring walk from town to town, because it is so filled with quest markers and events. That is an impressive feat that cannot be understated. The world of Final Fantasy VII comes alive and feels interconnected so believably and seamlessly. Now that said, good lord is it tedious! For as amazing and downright beautiful as some of these areas are, actually traversing some of them is such a pain in the ass. I can't be the only one who found Gongaga to be the most irritating place in the whole game, just because of how much of a pain in the ass it is to get anywhere in there with a shockingly unhelpful map. It's a good thing the zone is gorgeous and the music fantastic, otherwise I would be way more upset. I also found Cosmo Canyon to be frustrating too. Not nearly as bad, but still a pain. Basically, any of the regions that has more verticality to it, the more annoying it is. But really, the tedium comes from all the landmarks to hit in every region. For the most part, these all fall into the typical open world design trap, complete with climbing up a tower to activate it to reveal more landmarks in the area you go to. There's just nothing inherently interesting about doing these, even when they tried to mix it up and make you solve a mini puzzle of how to climb it up in the first place. The little live stream spots are exactly the same too. They're basically also towers to reveal more things, only you have to hit triangle 2 extra times in a minigame that never changes or alters or adds anything to the experience. It's just another means of revealing more things on the map. I do like how the game tracks how many things you've done in each region as you slowly fill in all the dots, and if you're someone who feels compelled to fill in all the dots before you move on to the next main story bit, you're gonna go insane. It's truthfully not that hard to do, and you can get through each one pretty quickly in just a couple of hours for each region, but it feels so much longer because of how tedious it is. None of it is bad, but not all of it is actually fun to do. Some of them are though. I quite like all of the boss monsters in each region, and without saying more, the proto-relic missions are absolutely the most worthwhile to do. As a quick aside, good lord, the soundtrack is phenomenal. Anyone else loving just how many feel-good music tracks there are? That Bow Wow Wow dog song, Kyrie's theme, the Gongaga region theme, all of the Gold Saucer tracks, all of these on top of the fantastic orchestrated versions of the original soundtrack. I'd go so far as to say even the entire game's album is better and stronger than Final Fantasy VII remakes. Anyway, the other thing that really impressed me was just how many mini-games Rebirth has and how good so many of them are. I've seen a lot of people moan about the multitude of mini-games and mechanics there are, and there are a lot, and even more pop up from there. But you gotta remember, the original Final Fantasy VII had a shit ton of mini-games. They brought so many of those over, enhanced them, and inserted several new ones. I liked the brief Fort Condor bits. All of the Gold Saucer minigames are great. There are certainly some minigames that aren't as strong as others, but none of them are bad. Like the piano playing is just okay, mostly because using analog sticks for precise timing is not the most reliable. The Chocobo stealth sections weren't awful, but not frustrating either. And I think that Gears and Gambits is easily the weakest of the bunch, if only because I found it wholly uninteresting rather than bad. But obviously the best minigame is Queen's Blood. All of these, along with the open world, still results in a game that has very good pacing and doesn't feel bloated. Like, there's a lot of game here for someone who wants to get the most out of their purchase or do everything. We're talking easily over 90 hours of content. And honestly, going higher than that wouldn't surprise me, especially if you try to 100% everything. A major improvement with all of this, Rebirth doesn't feel padded like Remake was. Like, Remake has several sections that just went on for far too long, or story areas that you couldn't escape from and were really frustrating. The sewers and Hojo's lab come to mind. Rebirth avoids a lot of this, with story beats and areas that don't overstay their welcome. I do not consider all of the open world icons and markers and side quests to be padded, because they're all entirely optional. You don't need to do all of it or any of it, and you can move on to the next story thing and come back later whenever you want. If you try to do every single thing before moving on to the next area, yeah, it's gonna feel long and padded because, well, you're trying to do everything. You don't have to. Optional side content isn't bloat, unlike being stuck in a dungeon-like area for 2 hours longer than you really should be with no way to fast travel out of it. There's maybe a couple of areas that feel a little long compared to most, but generally speaking, it felt much better paced than Remake for sure. Unless you're someone who has to complete every objective and fill in every dot before moving on to the next area, then you will get exhausted pretty easily. And I was someone who tried to fill in all the dots. The side quests you can do, all the green exclamation points, I also generally enjoyed. Not so much the gameplay of what you do in them, but for what they provided. I really liked how each one was basically tied to a different party member and it had them involved in it. It was a great way to give character development to them, whether it was backstory stuff or general personality traits or just seeing how they interact with Cloud. That made doing all of the side quests worth it, not the actual tasks. I hope they continue with that trend. This is not a spoiler section, so don't worry, but I did want to say this. With all of these new character moments and story elements, I really liked how much it fleshed out and improved every single character in the game. And if I had to pick one that was the most improved, it is hands down Barrett. Whether it was moments in the main story or any of his side quests, damn, they made Barrett excellent. They really showcased his humanitarian side. All the small moments where he tries to protect and save the Black Robes or people in whatever town, it was all great. When he got to talk about Marlene and his fatherly side comes out, it's so endearing. I also really like how much they let him be vulnerable too, not being afraid to show emotions or get upset at things. Anytime he busts out his sunglasses to hide his face, I felt it. They still allow him to act like an over-the-top silly caricature at times, but those are few and far between his very real, very empathetic scenes. He was practically a cartoon character in the original game. In here, I think Barrett might actually be my favorite character now. Everyone's new developments and character moments are excellent, but they really nailed it with everything Barrett. So yeah, generally, really liked Rebirth. I do have some thoughts on some of the story elements throughout the game, which means this part of the video is going to have spoilers. Skip to this time if you want to avoid all of that, or use the video chapter thing in the description. Last warning, okay, spoiler time, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. You still here? Good. You're the coolest of all the subscribers I have. The real ones who watch all the videos, especially the spoiler sections. So much cooler than those non-spoiler watching subscribers, am I right? You're the best. Leave a comment saying something about pickles so that we can all see who the coolest people in the comments are. Anyway, I would say easily the biggest point of contention I've seen in any discourse surrounding Rebirth is the changes to Red 13. Him revealing his real voice was very jarring compared to what we've all been used to for a couple of decades now, and how he always sounded in our heads. That said, I don't mind it. He's supposed to be a young wolf cat thing of his race, so him sounding younger or being a little more naive was fine. It was definitely weird, but I got over it really quickly. What I liked less was the complete change in his attitude. Going from a wizened elder of sorts to I am teen. I didn't mind the voice change, but his entire personality changing with it was weird, which is mostly a preference thing than anything else. I realized this is how Red was represented in the original Japanese release of Final Fantasy VII and all that, so I'm not here to argue against what the creator's intent was and how they wanted it to be. That said, I don't see the purpose in it. Before, Red 13 was the one who's able to drop a lot of knowledge to the party when it was needed. He always knew a lot about the history of the planet, the life stream, or any other magical, mysterious thing they encountered, which is why his original personality worked so well. With this teenage, naive Nanaki, he doesn't really serve a purpose to the party. Like, what role does he fill now? Now he acts like an upbeat teenager whose naivete can allow questions to be answered for the party and thus the player. But we already had someone who filled that role and purpose with Yuffie. They act very similar, almost too close for my tastes. I suppose you can still go Red 13 mode when it's most convenient for the plot, but it feels dissonant when it happens. I don't mind the change or how he acts now, but I struggle to see the purpose behind it. It doesn't cover up any gaps that was needed for the party dynamic. Maybe it'll make more sense for the third game, but probably not. And the other major event that I have gripes with is, and act surprised by this, the ending. Like, I knew this is where the game was going to end going into it. I was not surprised by it at all, but man, I really did not like the execution of it. Aerith's death is one of the most important, impactful moments in gaming history. Every step leading up to it, it was like they were trying to psych out the player like 8 different times. It was as if every second was the game going, oh, she's going to live. Just kidding. Oh, are we? Maybe she's not dead. Or is she? That is so goddamn frustrating. Because of the way it was structured, with the entire time seeing other possibilities and other timelines or universes or whatever, the entire scene was disjointed. Like, we don't even get to see the sword stab through Aerith. I don't think it worked. Whatever emotional impact that one of the most iconic historical scenes in gaming history should have had was completely lost. That's because instead of letting myself into the moment and feel it, my brain was too busy trying to solve a puzzle. It was too busy piecing together all the scenes I just saw and trying to discern what was real or not, or what all the other scenes that it saw, what did those mean? I couldn't have any kind of emotional response because the game put me into logic mode, and that's where I was for the entirety of it. I'm not here to theory craft or discuss what I think what meant what, because that's a long conversation, not meant for a quick YouTube review video, especially since we still don't have all the information for everything, so I'm not going to discuss anything in absolutes or definitively say what was what or anything like that. What I will say though is that they fumbled the most pivotal moment of the entire game. They weren't trying to give something memorable and beautiful, they were trying too hard to fake out the player. I think Aerith's death either had to be exactly the same or completely different for it to work, and they didn't hard commit to either extreme. It was this weird middle ground that probably won't pay off until the third game, which I don't think is ideal. It should be strong enough to stand on its own. That's it, the final battle with Sephiroth and having Aerith join you for it, that was awesome. It's not as subtle as the original game, but continuing the very clear messaging of Aerith still being there to help you in your struggle to save the planet was great. I realize it sounds like I'm kind of dragging the game pretty hard here, and that's not the case. The game is excellent, and I loved my time playing with it. I had a lot of fun, I still like the battles and everyone's playstyles, the cutscenes and the music are just as gorgeous, and I really like how much the game allowed itself to be fun and offer up silly moments. But I wanted to give more voice to my grievances since games like this usually end up getting universally showered with praise, and I didn't want to lose my voice to the choir. It is good. It's really good, and I loved it. Let me put it this way. I really liked Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I liked Final Fantasy XVI more than Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth more than Final Fantasy XVI. Unfortunately, it's not a game that I can recommend to anyone, simply because it's literally the smack middle of the story. If you didn't play Final Fantasy VII Remake or never played the original, then you should not start with Rebirth at all. Remake is practically required reading before going into Rebirth, and that's only the real knock I have against it. It isn't as easily accessible to anyone because you will be lost in the story without all the setup and the context. But the gameplay is fantastic, voice work phenomenal, music incredible, and lots of things to keep you occupied here. You absolutely get your money's worth with how much there is in the game to do. Highly recommended for RPG fans, and an absolute must for people who played Remake or the original 7. It's very good, even with a few things that irked me. Play it, enjoy it, and then get back to me when the third part comes out, and maybe we can have some goddamn answers for once.